How you doing, YouTube? This is Stosh back after a short hiatus. I'm continuing tonight. Where I am, it's cold. That's why I've got my hat as well as my intellectual gear on. Stosh, the Polish vlogger, is just mad vlogging lately with stuff. Sorry, my last ones have been pretty sloppy. Hope to improve with this one, which will probably get a few more viewers. Doing a quick review, or relatively quick review, of Mission of Honor, otherwise known as Hurricane Squadron over in Britain, and by the Polish title in Poland. Starring Iwan Rheon of Game of Thrones. This is about the Hurricane Squadron 303, but it's the Polish Kościuszko Squadron. If you may have noticed, if you've seen this on Amazon, it's kind of depolishized, depolished. It just says Hurricane Squadron 303, a group of pilots that fought bravely in the Battle of Britain. That's all. It stars also the son of the controversial actor Milo Gibson, and Stefanie Martini, extraordinarily beautiful actress from the UK. Okay, so when it came out back in 18, you might have said I did some guerrilla commercials right here on the Stosh channel. I was excited about the arrival of this tremendous movie. We were excited, as I'm sure the Poles were, and us Polish Americans were. I enjoyed the film, but, it was filled with what I saw as some disappointments. I noticed a lot of the reviewers said, well, we didn't like the battles. Well, I thought they were pretty well done. They said they didn't like the battles because the pilots came in too close behind the enemy and blew them away. Well, that's what they did. It was as I said in my other reviews, it was sort of quasi-suicidal. That's because the Poles lost half their country when they got in there. So they, I don't want to say they were exactly suicidal, but they were pissed, to say the least. They were willing to die and go all the way. And in combat, there's nothing like that, because combat is when like two meet. Part of it is the skill, and part of it is which one is willing to go all the way. Willing to get up behind the plane, not really caring if you're going to die. Take the enemy out. That's, of course, invaluable in combat. Plus, they had already seen a lot of experience before Poland, they were fighting before they went over to England. The 303 and 302 fought gallantly. I will leave notes about them in the liner notes, as well as books to read about the incredible squadron. Now, they were named after Tadeusz Kościuszko, the Revolutionary War hero, and as I've said before, they were the greatest squadron of World War II. The Battle of Britain was the most sophisticated air war ever, much like Kursk and Stalingrad, particularly Kursk on the Eastern Front, were the greatest tank battles and the worst battles known to mankind. The largest engagement. I say that was the most sophisticated air war, and they came out with the most kills. I believe the best guy in it was from another squadron overall, British guy, but taken pound for pound, the kill scores as opposed to losses in that squadron was the greatest, the 303 Kościuszko. Now, the film does mostly feature a pilot named Jan Zimbek. And he's the Game of Thrones fellow who acted brilliantly in it. Now let me go into the body of this, okay? And I'll go back to why I say number 303 Squadron of the Polish Kosciuszko Squadron, fighting on behalf of the RAF, was the greatest of World War II, briefly. And I've done that before in those pre-reviews. So there's a sort of a name change of the film. It's sort of depolonized. It's not less so on Netflix that I see. And it didn't feature quite enough, in my opinion, of the squadron leader Witold. Witold Urbanowicz, the Cobra. Someone made an argument that he's one of perhaps the greatest squadron commander. He had eyes in the back of his head. He went to Washington. He also fought over in China. He flew in China, I believe. Witold Urbanowicz. So the film doesn't feature as much as him as I might have liked. He's kind of a side character to the Game of Thrones fella. Who was brilliant in this film. I liked him. Jan Zumbach. Iwan Rheon. Quite an interesting actor. I have not really seen I have not seen Game of Thrones. I guess it's I regard it as kind of a Dungeons and Dragons soap opera with attractive looking people. But can't argue with the popularity. So a lot of it's a fictional film, to be fair. Mission of Honor, known as Hurricane in Great Britain. The focus of the film, a lot of it is romanced, and in the British tabloids talked a lot about how the British woman thought the Polish guys were sexy, which is fine. But a lot goes to that. As with the film Pearl Harbor, a lot went to romance. But, it's fiction. It's got to sell. But the focus of the film goes a lot to that. And after waiting a long time to get noticed, you might have hoped for a little more. But I think that, so you might want to, there's other films, 303 on the 303 Squadron, probably Polish made or made by other people that probably might be a little bit better. But this one got a little bit more hype. I think it was a little bit bigger and distributed more widely. No doubt, the film sort of attempted to show the incredible suffering of the guys because the country had been destroyed, occupied, attacked by Germany, occupied, and in recent controversy, the Russians are now denying that they attacked, but they certainly, it was a non-aggression pact between Germany and Russia, and they sandwiched Poland in and, took it over. That's my view. The Russians at this point are sort of contesting that. That's another topic. I'll leave in the liner notes some names of books that are probably, better. That better show this. Now, the commanding officers I think the main lead was Witold, and Jan Sumberg was also a squadron leader. The flying officer was Witold, though, and the pilot officer was Jan Sumberg. So, actually, the Czech pilot actually had more than the British guy, 17. Hey, Slavic power. And Obanowitz might have even had more, but he had 15 during the Battle of Britain. In any case, if you added them up, the most extraordinary is the 303, and this has been hidden, just like other distinct accomplishments in World War II of the Poles. Also, the code breaking was first done by the Poles of the Enigma machine, but this is very suppressed as well. The soldiers of the Poles were not allowed to march, and there was some rumors that the 303 was allowed to march, and there are some sources that say that they weren't invited too. So, as you may have noticed, every single one of these YouTubes where I bitch about the problems of the Poles and the Polish Americans, I will always usually bring up the fact that they weren't allowed to march on Victory Day. So, and as you may have known, the Polish also considered that they were betrayed at Yalta. But again, I digress. Let me go back to the film. So these are some of the problems. Now, so they had an incredible story. There's no part included where they flee. They just sort of arrive in Britain there. So it's almost as if you get the idea, they're bitter and everything had to do it with their acting ability. So there's not much shown. So I delved into the romance because that's a main feature of this film, romance, and the it's almost as if it's to say, well, the Polish guys are more interesting than the native British. I'm not, and the female lead, again, played by a Stefanie Martini, Phyllis Lambert. She plays Phyllis Lambert. She's working on behalf of the RAF, if I recall correctly, in the radar rooms. Also high stressed. And the film does a pretty good job of showing how they were flying to death. No sleep. Flying. Extremely dangerous. The question of near madness comes up because of so much flying, and they show that. The film is also a lot much better than the Battle of Britain with the great Laurence Olivier, which just shows one scene with the Polish. It's almost kind of insulting where they're talking Polish and it sounds funny. And Olivier's like, I may have underestimated the Poles. And they're like talking, and it looked fucking ridiculous. Even though it's overall a great movie, the Poles are portrayed like idiots in it, of course, at least from what I saw. He's like, I may have underestimated, and they're shown for about 3 seconds. This one, okay, it's romance with the CGI. It's very beautiful looking film, and pretty much, although sometimes that's a little off-putting. They're not real fighter planes engaging in much of the combat, but they're on the ground. So you see the beautiful Hurricane aircraft, the counterpart to the Spitfire, blah, blah, blah. But again, I keep going back. So the attractive woman, Stefanie Martini, beautiful Phyllis Lambert. She's a lot of the suffering, I don't even know if I should bring this up, but there's no excuse for men to put down women or abuse them, but there's a horrific scene where an RAF officer guy is virtually choking the woman to death because she shows him up to be an idiot and to be wrong. He's like, never do that again. He's choking her nearly to death. And quite frankly, in a certain sense, this is more stunning than anything that happens in the film. It almost seems to give a back seat to the gallantry of the Polish pilots. Anybody who's reviewed the film on Amazon, I see, is just, not really talking about that. So they must have been fighter pilot enthusiasts. And this is all a bummer. So that's basically where I'm at. The energy of the film is drawn to that scene. And the gallantry and the valor of what I personally consider, and what maybe you should if you research it, the greatest fighter pilot squadron in World War II.